Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm taking you through a full lower body workout. Legs for me, they're the hardest, the funnest, the worst, the best, everything. It's gonna suck, but in the best way possible. And I'm gonna take you through my full lower body workout and talk about why I'm executing certain exercises in a particular way. Because you might look at some of the things I'm doing and think, hey Steve, why are you doing it that way? Because range of motion, it's a big topic at the moment, and I'm gonna explain why on certain exercises, maybe more range of motion isn't better. For example, on the hack squat we're gonna do later, on the calf raises we're gonna start with. So there's gonna be a lot of insights into my own specific execution of my lower body training, and particularly quads, an area I really need to bring up. So let's get into it. So execution on these calf raises. First of all, single leg, only because I'm already getting over 20 reps and I'm using almost the whole stack. So I'm kind of forced into doing them single leg just because I can load them so heavy. And you might be like, Steve, you can load them so heavy because you're doing them partial ROM. I'm not getting that peak squeeze, and you're correct. Reason for that being is there's very good evidence showing that the calves grow better from performing a lengthened partial, so the first 50% of the range of motion, that stretched position, and skipping the contraction, and they grow better, significantly better. And there's like very good data to support this. I'll probably put some of the references in the description. I'm not gonna try and recall them off the top of my head. The other thing is I'm performing these straight leg and not bent knee. And I'd advise you guys, if you are to prioritize a straight leg versus a bent knee variation, to prioritize the straight leg variation. That is because we have a couple of recent papers showing that you basically get just as good growth of the soleus, but better growth of the gastroc through a straight leg variant. And this makes biomechanical sense because of the fact that the gastroc, the chunk of the muscle, crosses the knee joint as well. So when you bend the knee, it slackens, it's not getting very lengthened, whereas the soleus doesn't, so it still gets a good amount of muscle lengthening during both a bent knee and a straight leg variation. So I would recommend just take it 0 RAR pretty much all the time for your calf training. The fatigue, or even failure, the fatigue loss just isn't high. And this has actually led to me seeing my calves grow. And I know I was part of Team No Calves, I imagine, and many of you are a team of that. Doing the first within my workout too is 1, gets them out of the way, 2, make sure I put forth good quality effort because I'm not gonna be knackered after all my leg training. 3, actually gets me mobility through the calf. So I stretch it essentially through training it right now, especially for a heavy lengthened partial. So that's why I'm performing them as I am. And I'm doing one leg, then the next leg, and I get through these pretty quick. So I'll jump straight into my next set now. So I kind of glossed over it, but I do think this is important to recognize is on the calf, if I show off my puny calves here. So we have this chunk of muscle, which you can actually see, that's the gastroc. The soleus is more hidden underneath here. So if you're gonna try and grow one, from a visual perspective, it makes much more sense to prioritize that chunk of muscle. That's the gastroc, not the soleus. So just another reason why prioritizing your straight leg variants that's gonna grow that gastroc is really key. Yeah, so my perspective on rest periods is, we do have some research showing, I believe it's, as long as you get around 2 minutes of a rest period, I think it's in around 2 minutes. It didn't really show much benefit of having more than that, but having less than that did seem to compromise your quality of work. I think actually there was quite literally a recent study published. This wasn't a meta-analysis, the one I was referring to before was a meta-analysis. So studies are looking at a bunch of studies and giving you kind of the average evidence to take home. But this one showed that shorter rest periods did seem to hamper quality of performance. But if you have a short rest period, you might be able to get more done in a short period of time. And so you kind of make up for that lack of quality through quantity. I never like that personally. I always prefer to side with quality. So I'd always prefer someone to rest a little bit longer, be able to get an even higher quality set than rest shorter. And I prefer to use other time-saving techniques that have been shown within the research to provide really good hypertrophy, such as I already did a video on the antagonistic supersets, or doing drop sets is also an effective way, or myo reps, similar to the drop sets there, rest pause sets. And yeah, those basically, you're either just taking short rest periods, and so then the muscle's still fatigued, and so you're getting effective reps, or you're dropping the load, having a short rest period, and then you can get more effective reps because you've dropped the load. or like assistance reps, or also one of those techniques that you can use. There's probably some others I'm not able to think off the top of my head, but I prefer to use those than just shorten your rest periods between kind of straight sets generally. Yeah, that's kind of my perspective. And so on rest periods for me personally, it's a case of auto-regulating, and basically when I feel like the target muscle is going to be the limiting factor, and I can perform a quality set in that I know where I performed last week and I want to at least match that performance, I can go again. So my calves, take a set to failure on like one calf. By the time I've done that for my next calf, that calf is now pretty much recovered. So I can go boom, boom, boom. I'm not going to be limited by like cardiovascular because it's not a full body lift. Whereas my hack squats, probably going to need quite a bit more rest between those because physiologically, psychologically, to get in the zone again for a quality set, I'm going to need some more time. So I'll probably actually take longer on the hack squat than I will on here, even though I'm doing half the volume. I definitely will. We're going to hack squats next. As I've said, quads for me, big priority. I don't have the nice sweeping vastus lateralis that many competitors have. I just kind of have these chunky legs. So I just need to make that VL as big as possible, prioritize my quads as much as possible. And that means removing things like glutes from my quad work. That means removing things like adductors from my glute work, the inner thigh. And so I've had to experiment with changing the way that I execute my squat patterns so that the quads are the ones that are mechanically in the best position to do the work. And by that, that means, and I also, similar to the calves, want to get my quads lengthened. That seems to be very important for hypertrophy and under good tension. Hack squat, brilliant way of doing that. It forces the hips forward and under you, so you don't get much kind of flexion of the hips to introduce the glutes. Forces the knees forward, and then I have squat shoes on. So these have a heel lift. I also put in an extra insert in there to give me even more of a heel lift, so that I can get my knees as far forward over my toes, so I can really get a good stretch across the quad. But when I execute this, you'll see I have a relatively close stance, low on the platform, but I want full foot contact. Full foot contact isn't necessary, but when you do let your heels rise, you might be a little less stable and unable to use as much load. That might reduce the force that you can produce through the quads, reduce potentially mechanical stress the quads experience, and I want to kind of really, really focus on that. And I'll have a relatively close stance, feet more forward, so that I'm not stretching my adductors by having my knees go out, and I'll only come as deep until my knees reach maximum knee flexion, basically. So that basically I'm getting my quads as lengthened as it possibly can be. If I came any deeper, I'd only be introducing glutes. And I may even sacrifice knee flexion. You'll notice people do this, they sit deeper, their hips come lower, but their knees travel back to get that depth. And now they're lengthening it at the glutes and not getting the quad stimulus they should be by doing that. So this is a bit of a different thing for me. I'm also dealing with you might see it later on, a TFL strain. I've got some tape on there to try and like give myself a bit of a recovery placebo, as it were. So I'm kind of dealing with that. I'm also trying to hit a PR here, so I need to really get mentally in the zone. And regarding everything I said there is research also to kind of back this up. There was actually a recent study where they looked at leg press specifically, and this was the first study where they did it in trained individuals, because all the research prior to this wasn't trained individuals. And essentially they had someone doing like a half rep versus full depth, and they did allow their heels to raise, and they got max knee flexion actually, allowing their knees to raise. They got more knee flexion, but the half kind of reps achieved just as much quad growth. And that has been also mirrored in some squat research where they got to 90 degrees knee bend. So you're thinking kind of, yeah, that 90-degree squat versus a full squat, and they saw just as good quad growth. You maybe sacrifice a little bit glute growth and adductor growth, but for me, again, because quads are the thing I care about most, that's why I'm biasing it this way. So I think this is a good way to do it, and it's something a bit different, and especially a bit more of an advanced technical training technique for someone who really wants to just maximize quad growth. So anyway, I'll take you through some sets, maybe talk about some of the other aspects of it as well. So now I've warmed up to my working weight. I'm going to do a single, as I talked about in the other vlog. This is almost like a bit of a PAP set, post-activation potentiation. So I'll do a single at this, see how it feels. And you know I'm grinding away, right? I'm in week, I think, 11, maybe 12 of this meso. And I'm looking for a 1.25 kg increase on last week to match reps. Yeah, it's gonna be tough. But we'll do a single, hopefully it feels easy. It won't, but we'll go. I don't know if it's just this hack squat, but this is a Cybex hack squat, very popular for a reason, because a lot of people enjoy it, they think it's great. There's like many versions of it. This is one of the older versions, if you can't tell. It's a bit old and beat up, but I love it. I think this might be like version 2, but I will say different machines, it depends on how they're kept. So this one, I don't think like the gears and like internals of it have been updated or modified. So I just find myself really hitting a wall with this. So it might look like I still have reps left, but I'm like, that was me done. If I went down, there's no way I'm getting up. And I know very well where my limits are with this. Whereas I have used other Cybex hack squats, even ones in similar like version to this, because they've maybe had some of their internals, like the gears or whatever the internals are, updated. They're much smoother and easier to grind. This, like zero grindability on this really. Although I will also mention, I think that depends person to person, obviously machine to machine, but also because I'm doing less than 10 reps on this, the grindability on less than 10 reps just isn't there. Whereas higher reps, many of you will probably agree with this, you can grind out more reps in that rep range. Come on. So I'd say at least to the reference of more range of motion isn't always better. Obviously, initially with the calves, because if I was going full ROM on the calves, I'd fail in that short position. I'd have many more length and partials to get. In fact, I'm almost certain this has been reviewed in the literature too, where people went into like full ROM failure and then into partials, and they saw more growth, which makes sense. More lengthened exposures seems to lead to more growth, especially muscles are stronger in that lengthened, stretched position. And then here, again, more range of motion, not necessarily being better, can be for your goals, but also for the exercise at hand. So a lot of people think about like, hey, doing full ROM or getting as much range of motion as possible, especially at that lengthened position. But you have to think about muscles specifically. Am I getting any, if I'm trying to target the quads, are they lengthening any more by me coming deeper, or am I lengthening other tissues? And in this case, yes, and again, that's been shown in the literature. This study that I referenced, that was quite recent, the average participant was 7 years worth of training. So like these were well-trained individuals growing their quads just as well from doing half reps on the leg press versus much, much deeper. And maybe there's sort of a sacrifice of mechanical tension, load used, and force being able to be produced for the stretch element. Maybe they can equal one another out. Maybe there's an injury risk from using lesser ROM and more load. We don't know. These are things you have to figure out for yourself, and this is why science is just an indicator. It doesn't give you a path. You have to work that out yourself. Self-experimentation, which is what your man is doing here. First set felt great. Well, great within reason. Actually, I'd say great. It felt great, considering I've improved. To the point of which I'm almost like, if I've got the right amount of weight on here, which I do, it's 173.75, because I've got a 2.5 on that side and a 1.25 on this side. So truly micro loading. All things being equal though, that's progress. I'll take that small progress at this stage. So this set, I've got 9, 8, I'm going for 7, single rep drop off. Within this lower rep range is very normal for me. The 3 sets and I'm mentally tapped. The quads will have a little bit more in them and I will do a bit more quad work, which you'll see. So now we're doing an antagonist superset, So we're going to be doing standing leg curl. I haven't got a seated leg curl, so I'm going to make some modifications to this leg curl to make it a little bit better and talk you through those. And we're also going to do a hack sissy squat, which is a brutal exercise. But as I said, my hip flexor strain seems to get really pissed off with leg extensions. So this is a replacement for those. It's a particularly good replacement because the rec fem crosses the hip and the knee joint. So by having my hips forward, which you'll see on the sissy squat, it'll get lengthened more. And in theory, should grow better. I'm not aware of direct research on this. There was a study came out pretty recently that looked at lying back leg extensions. So having the hips straightened, stretching the rec fem more versus upright leg extensions, which is most machines. So more growth lying back, likely down to that greater lengthening of the quad. So this is a great way to do that with the sissy squat. You get into a great long muscle length, challenging it under load. And unfortunately, there was research looking at a seated leg curl versus a lying leg curl. Saw better growth with the seated, again, down to having the hamstrings in a more stretched position. Apart from the sartorius, which grew better with the lying leg curl because it was more stretched. So you're getting kind of a bit of a picture here of, hey, stretching muscles to a longer length seems to be pretty important for growth. And well, to date, all research looking at either a lengthened partial versus full ROM or a short partial has been superior or neutral. So certainly no downside to experimenting with some of these lengthened partials. We'll get onto the leg curl, I'll set that up. Now, something I'm doing here, you guys will know I'm a fan of the yoga block for a variety of reasons, but I add it to the back of my heel on these leg curls because it increases the range of motion. Something else I do is I try and basically mimic a seated leg curl position. So rather than standing upright and doing it, I lean over and basically try and get into a leg curl position and then perform the leg curl. So it gets me, again, a bit more length for the hamstring. Coming on to the hack sissy squat. These are particularly good if you're more advanced. Sissy squats, body weight you're getting up to really high reps. If you're much above 20, you're probably better off trying to find ways to load it. Hack squat is a brilliant way to do it because it's pretty comfortable. And Tom Platt's made these notoriously very popular, like the king of thigh development quads. And these are great because, as I said before, it was Larson et al. 2024 compared a lying back leg extension to an upright leg extension, found more growth with the lying back, and that's because the rec fem crosses the hip joint too. So if you keep your hips forward, which you should do on a sissy squat, they get stretched more, they should grow more, or make that set at least more effective. So make sure to keep your hips forward. That's probably the biggest key with this lift. And if you think extend hips, contract glutes, that should keep you in a good position. And just battle for those reps. I like to keep, again, toes forward, knees over toes. I'll see people do sissy squats trying to isolate their quads and then shoot their knees out. And again, they're stretching other tissues. So if you really want it quad, I would say keep your knees traveling over toes straight forward, as so. Now we're setting up Smith Good Mornings. I really like to be in a Smith machine for a few reasons. One, it's all set up. Obviously, barbell's the same, but it's just a really easy setup. You just get in there and can go. The benefit of this, whereas, for example, like an RDL variation of a hip hinge, is a little bit more set up. You also don't need many plates. I can't do much more than this. So that makes it a little bit easier. The benefit of the Smith versus a free bar is you're in a fixed bar path. That could have some downsides for sure, but the upside is stability. I can just hips back, push forward. I don't have to think about stabilize the muscles, anything else. And towards the end of my workout, which this is, it's nice not to have to worry about those other factors. And again, because I don't have a seated leg curl, my hamstrings don't get as stretched. The RDL or a hip hinge gets me into that stretched position much better. So it's just a little bit more tag along volume for the hamstrings, the glutes. But again, at the end of my session, it's not going to be as fatiguing because I can't work as hard, and it's not as big a priority at the hack squat, which is right at the start. And yeah, so I'll finish setting that up and do the final set of sissy squat hacks, and then we're starting here, and then not much else left. Feel out for another rep. I've actually changed my execution on these a little bit from how I did them in the past. In the past, it was just all about full ROM, and that was past full ROM, as much range of motion as possible for a given lift. And what I'd end up doing with good mornings is I would come like all the way down here, but I'd be getting spinal flexion, I'd be getting more knee bend, introducing other muscles into the mix. Whereas I just want to hit my hamstrings. Glutes are going to be involved, but I really want to hit hamstrings. So I'm thinking, again, feet more forward rather than out. Which again, if I start like opening up here, I'm going to start stretching my inner thighs, bringing the adductors. Whereas if I just push back, my hamstrings are getting more lengthened. And I just push back as far as I can until if I was to come any further, something would compensate. I'd have to bend my knees, or I'd have to round my back, or let my bend my knees, let my hips sink. So I just come back, up, and yeah, I found them to be a bit more effective this way. A little bit more biased versus like holistic muscle growth in some ways too. I will also superset these with an unrelated superset. I'll do a dumbbell lateral raise. They get a little bit ugly, I'll warn you ahead of time. They don't look pretty, but I think that's partly down to their resistance profile in that they're hardest up at the top where you're weakest. So I kind of let myself use a bit of momentum and drive to complement my strength profile to that a little bit better. I've got 3 sets of these. I have 5 sets of lateral delts because they just need a beating. I'll do 1 set of these and I'll go pick up the dumbbells. I like a low bar position on this as well. That would just emphasize the hamstrings a bit more versus the back. It just decreases the moment arm at the back. So if you have that high bar, it's going to really challenge your erectors and everything there. This still will, but not to the same degree. Bodybuilders struggle with being objective. A lot of bodybuilders love being self-coached, and they struggle to kind of outsource. I think, to put a broad generalization out there, men are a little bit worse at seeking help and advice from others. Women seem to be a bit better at that. More men do bodybuilding, and I'd say bodybuilders are more of that stereotypical guy that like, they know what they want to do, they're kind of like, they are the king, they have all the answers, because they want to feel that way, they want to feel self-assured and reassured. Sometimes they struggle looking at themselves and identifying strengths, weaknesses, what would make them more competitive as a bodybuilder. And as a bodybuilding judge, competitor and coach, I recognize this all the time. I'll see competitors, I'm like, if you just did this, whatever it might be, take 2 kilos more off. But they're like, oh no, if I take 2, I'm already skinny. I'm like, no, you're not skinny. You actually have heaps of muscle. You're just not conditioned enough to be that competitive. Or they are, I don't know, set on doing classic because they love C-bum. It's like, but you don't have a classic shape. You're actually much better if you did bodybuilding. And so I think sometimes they really do struggle. And one of the biggest things is many of us don't sing our praises enough. They don't look back at where they've come from. They're so focused on where they aren't and comparing themselves to other people that then is a comparison that becomes a thief of joy in that sense. Whereas actually you can use comparison in a healthy way. So that's partly why I love what I do as a coach, and also giving judges feedback. So I can sing their praises, but then also give them critical feedback of how they can improve. There's no point just blowing smoke up other people's asses. You need people in your corner that can tell you what you could do better. And I think there's so many bodybuilders out there with heaps of potential that just don't have that and aren't willing to almost let go of that ego of I know, I am the king, like I should know this. So there's no harm in failing and getting better or asking questions. So yeah, definitely. So this is another one where, again, if you're pure like, hey, loading the length and range, that is growth 101, nothing else matters. You wouldn't be doing hip thrusts, but because hip thrusts, they don't put the most load in the lengthened position, they put it more in the short position. But there was a paper that Brett Contreras and Menno Henselmans funded, Watkins et al., and they compared squats to hip thrust. They saw equal growth. Now that study itself, like every study, is debated to some extent. But I also would question what exercises allow you to isolate the glutes. There aren't that many, especially good ones, especially ones that put you in a lengthened position. So hip thrusts are a great way to isolate the glutes. And you just have to think about anecdote too. Brett Contreras, the glute guy, for a reason, put tons of size on thousands of women's glutes, primarily through a hip thrust, amongst other things. I think there's a reason why he loves it so much. So we can't just dismiss the anecdote and, again, get rid of things, because there's more to program design than simply range of motion. Many other elements like volume, sustainability, intensity, many other variables. I've just done something really stupid. I used the wrong weight for the lateral raises. I was like, they feel all right. I'm not having to cheat that bad. And I was like, oh, it's because they're 17.5, not 20s. On the final thing of this workout, which is deadly hip thrusts, which I don't love, speaking about strengths and weaknesses. Hip thrusts are not something I included in my program for the last 5 or so years. I did them for a short period of time, maybe 2014, 15, when they're very, very popular. And then I got rid of them because I was like, hey, my glutes are never a weakness. But getting shredded for the bodybuilding stage, when you remove all that body fat around your glutes, suddenly your glutes don't look as big as you thought. And I struggle to get glute lines through top to bottom of my glutes and from the rear. So I have been including some dedicated isolation work for my glutes. As a competitor, seeing that as a weakness, knowing if they're bigger, they'll show through. Similar to abs, if you haven't got abs when you're lean, you just don't have thick enough abs. If you have big, thick abs, you can be a higher percentage body fat and they still show. So I'm trying to see if I get brutally strong at hip thrusts, which I'm starting to get, my glutes might be more apparent when I get leaner. And that'd be great, because then I won't have to sacrifice other muscle to get them in or be more competitive just generally. I don't know who designs these hip thrusts, but they must not be using much weight, or they have some sort of like crazy padding along their crotch, because you've got to pad this out if you're at all strong, because it just absolutely kills if you don't. Top tip, yoga mat. I've got 270 kilograms here. I'm aiming for a good 16 reps. These might not all be strictly full ROM where I lock out at the top, but they're not lengthened partials, not quite. Oh. 17. I'd probably give 2 tips for hip thrusts. One is when you're in the top position, you want basically a vertical shin. If you have your feet too far forward or back, you end up recruiting more of tissues you don't want, like the quads or the hamstrings, whereas you want glutes. That's why you're doing the hip thrust. And then the other thing is, because it is harder at the top, easier at the bottom. Using drive to get it to the top. Be aggressive to, again, help make up for that kind of mismatch of strength to resistance profile. So you'll see I kind of get aggressive out of the hole. What a great question. In terms of what comes last, you probably want to leave your least important muscles to last. So as an example, for me with upper body, as we had in our last vlog, it was arms. Because for me, thankfully, arms are not a weak point. Now for times in which you don't have something that is deprioritized because it's a strength, then you might want to vary what you put earlier within a workout and later within a workout. That's quite often why things like calves, abs, they get left to the end of the workout and they become weak points by default because they're so deprioritized. The other argument would be that you want to do your big bang per buck exercises first when you're most energized, you give forth the best efforts towards them, which I've got time for, but also don't think that's a must. I think you can put weaker muscle groups first or isolation exercises first. Again, it just depends on the person. I'd say the more advanced you are, the more useful that thing can be because you truly have strengths and weaknesses. And you can also pre-fatigue muscles so that you might even get a better overall stimulus to fatigue trade-off. But when you're more novice, do your big kind of compound movements first, where you're going to get a lot of growth from those. You're not that strong where it's going to become a problem. You also don't have to worry about strengths or weaknesses. You could vary kind of exercise order to some extent though. If you're doing upper body, it doesn't always have to be chest first, for example. Rotate between chest and back, that sort of thing. So yeah, it definitely depends. There's some of the things it depends on. So guys, that was my first lower body workout of the week, and really talking about the importance of range of motion as it comes towards hypertrophy, and how the research at the moment is really showing that it's important to get tension at long muscle lengths, but more range of motion isn't always better. As I described with the hack squat, we're looking for range of motion at my quad, not necessarily thinking about range of motion for the hack squat as a whole. So it might not always be the case that you have to sink things as deep as possible, take things as far as possible within lifts, and that you can also get complementary benefits possibly from including some short bias movements like a hip thrust and the dumbbell lateral raises. We can get a bit more volume through those muscle groups, but maybe not for the same fatigue or challenging muscles slightly differently. And I say not for the same fatigue because ultimately joint and connective tissue can be a limiter for many people. As I mentioned, I've got this TFL strain, I've got my knees that are kind of not particularly happy, and that can be because you're just beating the same areas over and over again. So if you can mix things up a little bit, that's important. And remembering that this is just one variable. Range of motion is one variable, we've got training intensity, kind of practicality, volume, frequency, like adjustability of exercises, loadability of exercises, how easy are they to progress, stability. There's many things that go into program design, exercise selection, not just range of motion. So those are some of the key take-homes. Range of motion isn't all equal, more is not better. Certainly loading length and ranges is a core cornerstone of your programming. But especially as you get more advanced, you might want to start thinking less about range of motion for an exercise and more range of motion for a muscle group. And including some short ranges or bias movements is no bad thing to do. Think about holistic program design, and yeah, you'll be well on your way. So guys, if you have any questions about this, do ask. If you want to see a future vlog, do let me know what that might be. Give me a subscribe, give me a like, all that good stuff. And remember, at Revive Stronger, and me myself, I spend most of my time online coaching. So if you are interested in coaching and program design and you want someone to take that helm for you, then I'm here for that. And I'm also happy to educate, answer your questions as well during the coaching process. So yeah, guys, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.